The world held its breath the moment she spoke. The wind a silent witness, the afternoon sun a hesitant observer behind a veil of cloud. The quiet gravel road, usually just a path, stretched between us like an unspoken boundary, the edge of two separate lives poised to intertwine. I couldn't have known then that her simple question would ripple through the stagnant waters of my year, perhaps even my entire existence, creating a turning point I hadn't dared to imagine. It wasn't merely the words that resonated within me, but the profound vulnerability in her eyes, a hesitant trust that sought something deeper than mere permission, a silent plea that spoke of a brokenness I couldn't yet comprehend, hidden beneath the composed facade she so carefully maintained. And she, in turn, couldn't perceive the silent chasm within me, the aching need for someone, anyone, to believe in the fractured pieces of myself again, after a loss that had stripped me bare. If you're watching this, if you too understand the quiet desperation for connection, the profound beauty of second chances, and the unexpected souls who appear when the world feels too heavy, then please, take a moment to acknowledge this story. Her name was Monica, and the first time my gaze truly landed on her was on the winding dirt road that embraced the small, ranch-style retreat center nestled in northern Colorado, a sanctuary where weary souls came to mend, to escape the crushing weight of burnout, or the relentless storms of life they no longer knew how to navigate alone. I wasn't a healer in the traditional sense. I was simply Jonathan, the groundskeeper. 33. Quiet, a man meticulously piecing himself back together after a heartbreak so profound it had unraveled the very fabric of my beliefs. I had arrived here, seeking refuge from the echoing void left by my younger brother's accidental death, a fracturing loss that had left my family adrift and unprepared. Working the earth, mending fences, tending to the horses, it was all I could manage, and perhaps all that kept me from fully succumbing to the crushing weight I carried. Monica had arrived 2 days prior, a withdrawn whisper among the other guests, a shadow moving through the sunlit grounds. She kept mostly to herself. Her only predictable routine, a morning jog along the trail that snaked past the weathered wooden gate where I often worked. I observed the subtle hesitations before she spoke, the way her smile never quite reached the depth of her eyes, the unconscious way she seemed to shrink, subtly pulling inward when others approached. There was a quiet familiarity in her solitude, a silent language that spoke of a past whose lingering touch still rested heavy on her shoulders. Much like my own, the moment that shifted everything unfolded on a warm afternoon as she returned from her run, a delicate sheen of sweat on her forehead, her breathing a soft, unsteady rhythm. She paused by the gate I was repairing, a blush rising on her cheeks as she asked if she might slip behind it to change her shirt, rather than trek all the way back to the distant cabins. Her request carried an almost palpable embarrassment, an exquisite vulnerability. She seemed unsure, not of the simple act itself, but of the unspoken trust it required. "Should I change here or look away?" she asked, her voice a fragile murmur. In that question, I sensed a deeper inquiry, a silent plea to gauge the lingering gentleness in a world that might have proven unkind. I met her gaze, a soft warmth in my own, and replied, my voice a low, steady current. "Do whatever you need." What followed wasn't dramatic, yet it resonated with an intimate weight. She simply stepped behind the aged wood of the gate, a momentary blurring of her form. The rustle of fabric was a soft sound, almost inaudible, as she exchanged her damp shirt for a clean one she'd had tied around her waist. When she emerged back into the sunlight, her small, grateful smile held a fragile beauty that settled deep within me. That unassuming act, her quiet trust in my gaze, in my discretion, lingered long after her retreating form disappeared from view. It was a seed planted, a quiet acknowledgement of a shared, unspoken understanding. Over the next few days, her pauses by the gate became more frequent, less accidental. Sometimes she feigned needing directions, her eyes dancing with a playful mischief that belied her true intent. Other times, she inquired about the horses, their soft muzzles and gentle eyes, or the shifting whims of the weather, as if these mundane conversations were delicate threads, slowly stitching back together the torn edges of her soul. Gradually, tentatively, she began to unspool fragments of her story. She spoke of Ohio, of a new beginning sought in Colorado, a desperate escape from a long, draining relationship that had systematically eroded her confidence. Her ex, she confessed, had diminished her, made her feel small, weak, utterly dependent. She had come to the retreat seeking the woman she no longer recognized. Listening to her was like holding a mirror to my own wounded spirit. Her words echoed the quiet ache within me. I found myself sharing, in return, the raw edges of my own grief. The sudden, brutal loss of my brother, how it had shattered the very purpose that once anchored me, how I had retreated, pushing everyone away, because the world, in its deafening loudness, only amplified my pain. She listened, a quiet stillness in her, allowing my words to hang in the warm, sun-drenched air between us, a shared breath. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt truly seen, truly heard, and perhaps, for the first time in years, she felt safe enough to simply exist, unjudged, in someone else's presence. Days bled into weeks, and our separate routines began to intertwine with an organic ease neither of us had anticipated. Her morning jogs became an anticipated rhythm. I'd find myself devising excuses to be mending a fence near the trail or brushing down the horses, my gaze subtly following her as she passed. She, in turn, would offer to help me water the garden, even with a self-deprecating laugh about her supposed black thumb, her touch light and hesitant on the leaves. Her laughter, once so rare, now flowed more freely around me, a warm melody. Her shoulders seemed to shed an invisible burden. Her eyes, once shadowed, began to sparkle with a newfound light. I started to understand that healing wasn't always a dramatic, thunderous event. Sometimes, it arrived in the softest of glances, in the quiet intimacy of shared silence, in the gentle knowing that someone remembered your story, truly remembered, without a hint of judgment. One late afternoon, after a long, arduous day, clearing storm-felled branches, I found her sitting alone near the weathered wooden barn. Her knees were drawn to her chest, her arms wrapped tightly around them, as if holding herself together. Her breathing was uneven, a soft hitch in her chest, her eyes red-rimmed, a fresh vulnerability exposed. She confided that she'd received a message from her ex, a venomous reminder that had dragged her back into the old fear, a cruel whisper that she'd never make it on her own, that she would inevitably fall back into dependence. I sat beside her, not touching, not speaking at first, simply offering my presence, a silent affirmation that she wasn't alone in this sudden, sharp pain. She whispered, her voice barely audible, that she didn't want to be a burden. My response was immediate, firm yet gentle, a warm hand reaching for her fragile spirit. You are not a burden, I said, my voice low, steady. You are stronger than you realize. Healing doesn't make you weak, and trusting someone again isn't a failure. I spoke with a quiet intensity, willing her to absorb the truth in my words, hoping she felt even a fraction of the profound conviction they carried. As the weeks unfolded, she transformed, not behind the modesty of a gate this time, but as a human being blossoming anew. Rediscovering the vibrant core of herself, she stood taller, her posture an unspoken declaration of newfound strength. Her smile, once hesitant, now met the world without flinching. She began to extend herself to other retreat guests, guiding morning stretches with a newfound confidence, sharing her story, her own journey, when someone else needed a quiet word of encouragement. Her transformation wasn't an overnight miracle, but a steady, brave unfolding, a testament to her resilience. And somewhere within that unfolding, without either of us needing to articulate it, something warm and hopeful began to bloom between us. Not a romance rushing headlong into a future, but a quiet admiration, a bond forged in the crucible of shared vulnerability and the unspoken language of healing. The most poignant moment arrived on her last evening at the retreat. The sun, a painter of the western sky, dipped low behind the ancient pines, lavishing the clouds in soft, fiery layers of orange and rose. She walked, with a deliberate slowness, to the very wooden gate where our story had truly begun. Her eyes, clear now and filled with an almost liquid emotion, met mine. She confessed, her voice thick with a raw honesty, that she was scared to leave, because this place had become an intrinsic part of her healing. She worried that outside the sanctuary of these grounds, she would crumble, fall apart again. I stepped closer, closing the small distance between us. The scent of pine and fading sunlight surrounding us. Healing isn't a place, Monica, I murmured, my gaze holding hers. It's a choice you've already made. I reminded her, gently but firmly, of every quiet moment she had risen, every deliberate step she had taken towards rebuilding her confidence. You aren't leaving weaker, I told her, my voice a soft promise. You are leaving transformed. She moved into me then, a quiet embrace, her arms tightening around my waist, a silent thank you for seeing her, for believing in her when she had utterly forgotten how. I held her, gently, my hands resting lightly on her back, feeling something deep within me settle for the first time in years. A quiet peace, a fragile hope. In that fading evening light, we made no grand, unrealistic promises. Instead, we simply acknowledged the unspoken commitment to keep choosing growth, to keep holding on to hope, to keep believing in the possibility of better days, together or apart. If this story has resonated with even a small part of your heart, please consider acknowledging it. It genuinely helps more people find stories that remind them they are not alone. Before I conclude, a heartfelt request. Comment below what part of this story touched you most deeply. And always remember, sometimes the smallest, most vulnerable act of trust becomes the genesis of an entirely new, luminous chapter.